The room was silent, the air thick with tension, as Maya Williams, dressed in her faded maid's uniform, stood in front of the open safe. Her hands shook slightly, not from fear but from the weight of the decision she had just made. She glanced over her shoulder to check if anyone was watching. The luxurious, pristine hotel room seemed to mock her as she carefully removed bundles of cash from the safe. The money was meant for a deal that could save a life. She held the cash in her hands, her breath shallow, her heart racing. In her arms, the small child she had been taking care of lay still, pale and fragile. The boy, Jameson, was the son of the billionaire she worked for. His condition had worsened overnight. He had been diagnosed with a rare and terminal illness. Despite the family's wealth, they had not yet found the right treatment, and time was running out. Maya had been watching Jameson's deterioration for weeks, helpless, but something inside her snapped when she overheard the doctors in the hallway saying there was nothing more they could do. Her thoughts were clouded by fear and desperation. She had to act now. Without any hesitation, Maya grabbed the cash from the safe, and without another glance, she moved quickly toward the door, Jameson's weak body cradled in her arms. She had made a choice no one would understand, but it was the only choice she could live with. As she stepped out into the hallway, Maya could feel the weight of the money in her hands. It wasn't just money, it was a lifeline. She was determined to use it to get the treatment Jameson desperately needed, no matter the cost. She had tried everything else, pleaded with the doctors, begged the family, but nothing had worked. Time was running out, and now she had to take matters into her own hands. But as Maya rushed down the corridor, her heart pounded in her chest, and she could almost hear the billionaire's voice in her head. He would never forgive her. He would never understand. He would accuse her of betrayal, of theft. But Maya was beyond caring. Jameson's life mattered more than anything. She had nothing to lose now. She reached the elevator and pressed the button frantically, but as the doors opened, she froze. Standing before her was the billionaire himself. His tall, imposing figure seemed to fill the entire space. His expression was unreadable, but there was something in his eyes, something that made Maya's stomach churn with guilt. He was holding a folder, the kind of folder that looked important, the kind that looked like it could change lives. But right now, Maya couldn't focus on that. She couldn't focus on anything except the child in her arms and the money in her hands. His voice cut through the silence, cold and hard. "What are you doing here, Maya?" Maya's breath caught in her throat. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. She could feel the eyes of the other staff members watching from a distance. She could feel everything, the guilt, the fear, the shame. She had never felt more exposed in her life. But there was no going back now. She had made her choice, and she would live with the consequences. I'm trying to save him," she whispered, her voice trembling. The billionaire's eyes narrowed. "Save him? With my money?" Maya bit her lip, trying to hold back the tears. "You don't understand. He needs treatment, and he's running out of time. I can't let him die." The billionaire looked at her for a long moment, his face unreadable. For a brief second, Maya wondered if he would call security, if he would have her thrown out. But then something shifted. His eyes softened, just slightly. His hand dropped from the folder he was holding, and for the first time, Maya saw the faintest trace of something resembling concern in his expression. He stepped closer to her. "Maya." His voice was quieter now, almost gentle. "You should have told me. Why didn't you tell me?" Maya's heart twisted as she looked at him, her eyes brimming with tears. "I didn't know how. I didn't know who to turn to. I thought I was the only one who cared." She lowered her head, unable to look him in the eyes anymore. The silence between them stretched on, heavy and thick. The only sound was the faint hum of the elevator. And then, just as Maya thought he might turn away, the billionaire spoke again. "You didn't need to steal from me to save him," he said quietly. "I would have given you the money." Maya's eyes shot up, meeting his gaze, her breath catching in her chest. She had never expected that. She had never thought for a moment that he would help her, especially not after everything she had done. But as she stood there, the weight of the decision she had just made beginning to sink in, she realized something. She had been wrong. This wasn't just about money. It was about trust, about believing that there was still some good left in the world, even in the most unexpected places. "I apologize for what I am doing," I never imagined it would come to this. Maya thought as she stood in the lavish hallway, the cold grip of reality sinking in with every passing second. Her fingers trembled slightly, still holding the bundle of cash in one hand, her other arm wrapped around the fragile boy who had become her world over the past few weeks. She had been working in the billionaire's estate for months, silently enduring the pressures of her position, but nothing had prepared her for the moment when she knew there was no other option. Jameson's condition was worsening, his breath shallow and uneven. Maya had watched, helpless, as doctors had shaken their heads, unable to offer any further hope. She could not stand by any longer. The decision to take the money had been spontaneous, fueled by desperation and the hope that maybe, just maybe, this small act of defiance could save a life. As she walked down the corridor, the weight of her actions began to settle in her chest. Maya had always been quiet and respectful, knowing her place in the world as a maid. But this was different. She was willing to cross lines she had never dreamed of crossing for someone she loved, as if he were her own child. She paused outside the door of the elevator, her heart pounding. This was the point of no return. She could feel the bile rising in her throat, but she couldn't back out now. Not when Jameson's life hung in the balance. The doors opened with a soft ding, and there stood the man who owned the estate, the billionaire, Thomas Beckett. He was tall, his presence commanding. He had always been distant, his interactions brief, almost mechanical, as if she were nothing more than a fixture in his home. But today, as his eyes locked with hers, there was something different. A tension, something unsaid, hung between them. Maya froze for a moment, the floor beneath her seeming to shift. She had imagined this moment 1,000 times, but she never expected it to feel so real. She was used to being invisible, to slipping through the cracks of his world unnoticed. But now, she was caught. "Maya," he said, his voice smooth but carrying an edge she hadn't anticipated. "What are you doing here?" His eyes flicked briefly to the boy in her arms, then back to her. She swallowed, trying to steady herself. I'm trying to help him." Her voice was barely a whisper, fragile like the boy she held. "I'm trying to save him, Mr. Beckett." Thomas studied her for a moment, his brow furrowing as if weighing her words. His expression was unreadable, but his posture remained rigid. "Save him? With what? What exactly are you doing?" Maya's heart raced. She had thought of nothing else but Jameson's treatment. She couldn't explain the details in this moment, but the money was her only chance. "Please, sir. I know you don't understand. But Jameson, he's dying. The doctors said there's nothing more they can do." Her voice cracked as she spoke, the desperation spilling out uncontrollably. "I don't have the resources to save him, but I can try. I have to try." Thomas didn't speak immediately, his eyes flicking to the cash in her hands and back to the boy's pale face. The silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. Maya felt the urge to run, to hide, but she stood still, hoping he would understand. She had crossed a line, but her heart refused to accept that there was no way back. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Thomas's voice broke the silence. "You should have come to me," he said quietly, his tone softer now. Maya looked up, confused. "What? You don't have to steal from me, Maya," he said, his voice betraying the faintest hint of regret. "I could have helped you. I could have given you the money." Maya blinked, her mind struggling to process what he was saying. "You would have helped?" she asked, her voice trembling. Thomas nodded slowly, stepping closer. "I would have. I didn't know you were so desperate. I didn't know Jameson was so close to death. But now I do, and I won't let him suffer if there's something I can do." For the first time, Maya felt a surge of hope. She had made the right choice, not by taking the money, but by trusting that someone in this cold, uncaring world might care enough to help. As Thomas reached out, his hand resting gently on Jameson's shoulder, Maya realized the true meaning of what he had said. It wasn't just about the money, it was about trust, about the unspoken connection between people who care. And in that moment, Maya felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. A glimmer of belief that maybe, just maybe, things could change. "I am sorry for everything that happened," Maya thought, her heart heavy with the weight of her actions as she stood there, facing Thomas Beckett, the man whose wealth could have solved all the problems, whose influence could have saved Jameson's life, but he didn't know how bad it had gotten. Not until now. The tension in the air was palpable as they stood in silence, the unspoken words hanging between them. Maya's gaze shifted to Jameson, who was still cradled in her arms. His once bright eyes were now dull, his body limp and fragile. His condition had been deteriorating for weeks. And despite her best efforts, nothing had worked. Maya knew that if she didn't act quickly, if she didn't find the money to pay for the treatment Jameson needed, he would slip away forever. The decision to take the money had been rash, but it felt like the only option left. She had no choice. She had been trying to care for Jameson on her own, without asking for help. But in the end, desperation had forced her to steal. And now, here she was, standing before the man who could have helped her, yet never had. Thomas looked at her, his expression unreadable. "You should have come to me sooner," he said, his voice quieter than before. "I could have helped, but now it's too late. You stole from me, Maya. You crossed a line." Maya felt the sting of his words, but she didn't back down. "I didn't know what else to do," she replied, her voice trembling with emotion. "I've tried everything, Thomas. I've begged the doctors. I've asked for help, but no one was willing to do anything. Not until now. You don't understand. I couldn't just let him die." Thomas's face softened for a moment, and Maya saw the flicker of sympathy in his eyes. For the first time since their conversation had started, he looked at her as if he understood. "I do understand, Maya," he said quietly. "But stealing from me wasn't the answer. You should have come to me. We could have worked something out." Maya shook her head, her frustration rising. "It's too late now," she said. "Jameson doesn't have time for us to figure this out. I can't wait anymore. I can't just sit around and watch him die." Thomas looked down at Jameson, his expression shifting. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then, finally, he spoke again. "You're right," he said, his voice low but firm. "You don't have time, and neither do I. I never realized how bad things had gotten for you. I've been too focused on my own problems to see what was happening right under my nose." He paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. "I'm sorry, Maya. I should have done more. I should have stepped up sooner. But I'm here now, and I'm not going to let you do this alone." Maya looked at him in surprise. She had expected him to be angry, to dismiss her completely. But instead, he was offering his help. She didn't know what to say. For a moment, she felt as though the ground beneath her feet was shifting. It was hard to believe that Thomas Beckett, the man who had seemed so distant and cold, was now standing before her, offering to help her save the boy she loved. "What are you saying?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm saying that I'm going to help you save Jameson," Thomas replied, his voice steady and unwavering. "I know I've made mistakes. I've ignored things that I should have paid attention to, but I won't make that mistake again." He looked down at Jameson, then back up at Maya. "We'll get him the treatment he needs. We'll do whatever it takes." Maya's heart skipped a beat. She had never expected this. She had never thought that Thomas would offer her help, especially after everything that had happened. She had expected him to push her away, to demand that she leave. But instead, he was offering a chance, a real chance to save Jameson's life. It was more than she could have ever hoped for. "You'll help me?" she asked, her voice breaking with emotion. "Yes," Thomas said, his eyes meeting hers. "I will. I am sorry, Maya. I should have seen this coming." Thomas thought to himself as he watched Maya's face soften with the unexpected relief he had offered. For a moment, it felt like the world had shifted in ways neither of them anticipated. Thomas Beckett, the billionaire who was known for his cold, emotionless demeanor, was now taking steps to help the woman he had once ignored, to help save a child who wasn't even his own. But in the silence that followed, Maya's relief was mixed with something else, a deep, unspoken guilt. She had taken that money. She had stolen. And despite the offer of help now, she still felt the weight of her actions pressing down on her. She had crossed a line, and it would be hard to undo what had already been done. As Thomas made the call to arrange the treatment for Jameson, Maya stood quietly by, watching him speak into the phone with the authority of someone used to getting things done. The hospital would be contacted immediately, and treatment would start right away. It was all happening so quickly that Maya could hardly keep up. For the first time in what felt like forever, there was hope. But the truth was, nothing would feel quite the same after today. Maya had taken a huge risk. And now, the man who had once been a stranger to her was offering his help in a way she never could have imagined. After Thomas finished the call, he looked at Maya again, his expression serious but not unkind. "It's done," he said simply. "They'll have Jameson in for immediate treatment. He's going to be okay." Maya blinked in disbelief. She couldn't process the words. Not yet. It was more than she could have ever hoped for. "You'll help me?" she asked, her voice breaking with emotion. "Yes," Thomas said, his eyes meeting hers. "I will. I am sorry, Maya. I should have seen this coming." Thomas thought to himself as he watched Maya's face soften with the unexpected relief he had offered. For a moment, it felt like the world had shifted in ways neither of them anticipated. Everything had happened so fast, and the weight of it all was still sinking in. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. She didn't know how to express what she was feeling: gratitude, relief, guilt, confusion, all tangled up together. But Thomas only nodded, his gaze softening for a brief moment. "Don't thank me yet," he said. "We've got a long road ahead of us, Maya. Jameson needs care, and I need to make sure you're both taken care of." Maya felt the lump in her throat grow. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she had someone on her side, someone who wasn't just helping out of obligation, but out of a genuine desire to make things right. There was still much to be done, and the journey ahead was uncertain. But in that moment, Maya knew that everything had changed. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time, she wasn't walking it alone. As they left the estate together, Thomas by her side, Maya looked at Jameson one last time. The boy who had brought them all together was still in her arms. But now he had a chance, a real chance to survive. And for the first time, Maya allowed herself to believe that things could get better, that they could make it through this. And it all started with a choice to take a risk, to trust, and to hope. And now, Maya had someone to help her, and someone to fight alongside her. For the first time, she felt like she wasn't invisible. She wasn't just the help. She was someone who mattered. She was someone who could change the course of her own story. "I am sorry for all of this," Maya thought as she stood next to Thomas in the sterile hospital room, watching Jameson, the boy she had cared for, finally hooked up to machines that could save his life. The machines beeped rhythmically, providing a constant reminder of how close they had come to losing him, but also how far they had come in just a short period of time. It had been only a few days since Thomas had stepped in to help, and already Jameson's condition was improving. Maya knew it wasn't going to be easy, but there was a part of her that allowed herself to feel a sense of relief. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to breathe. The weight she had been carrying was slowly starting to lift. The doctor had just left after explaining the treatment plan. Jameson was stable, and there was a real chance he could recover. But there was still a long road ahead. Maya wasn't naive enough to think this was the end of it. As the nurse adjusted one of the IV lines, Maya turned to Thomas, who was standing quietly by the door, watching her. His face was impassive as always, but there was a shift in his posture, something that made Maya realize that he, too, had been affected by all of this. He wasn't the same man who had been so distant when she first came to work at his estate. He had changed. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Thomas met her gaze but didn't speak right away. There was something about the moment that made words seem unnecessary. After everything that had happened, after all the uncertainty, Thomas was here now standing by her side, doing what he could to help. That was more than she could have ever asked for. "You don't need to thank me," Thomas said after a moment, his voice steady but not cold. "You've done the hard part. I'm just doing what I should have done a long time ago." Maya felt the tears welling up in her eyes, but she forced them back. She couldn't cry, not now, not here, not when Jameson needed her to stay strong. "I don't know what I would have done without you," she said, the words coming out before she could stop them. She wasn't sure why she was so emotional, but she knew that she was overwhelmed by everything that had happened. Thomas's eyes softened, and for a brief moment, Maya saw a flicker of something regret, perhaps, or understanding. "You would have figured it out, Maya," he said quietly. You're stronger than you think. Maya didn't respond right away. She just nodded, taking a deep breath as she turned back to Jameson. The boy had been through so much already, and now he had a real chance to survive. That was all that mattered. Thomas watched her for a moment longer before speaking again. You're going to be okay, Maya, he said, his voice gentle but firm. Jameson's going to be okay. I'm going to make sure of it. Maya nodded again, but her mind was already moving ahead, thinking of the future. She had spent so much time focusing on Jameson's survival that she had forgotten about everything else. She had forgotten about herself, about what she would do when this was all over. She had no idea what was next, but for the first time, that uncertainty didn't feel as terrifying as it once had. Thank you, Thomas, she said softly, her voice steady now. For everything. He didn't respond at first, but Maya felt his presence beside her, solid and reassuring. She had never expected to be standing here with him, sharing this moment. It felt surreal, like a dream she hadn't allowed herself to have. The billionaire who had once seemed like a distant, untouchable figure had become something more, someone she could trust. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for sure. Whatever happened, she would never forget the lesson she had learned in this moment. Sometimes, it takes stepping out of the darkness, taking a risk, and trusting someone to help you find the light. And Maya had found that light, in a place she never expected in Thomas Beckett. She smiled faintly, her heart swelling with gratitude and a renewed sense of hope. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't alone in this fight. They were in this together, and that was all that mattered. I never thought I would be here. Maya's thoughts swirled as she sat in the hospital waiting area, her hands folded tightly in her lap. The days had blurred together long, exhausting, and full of tension, but they had brought her here, to this moment, where things were finally beginning to look up. Jameson's treatment was working. He was awake now, the color returning to his face, his eyes more alert than they had been in days. But with that hope came a new kind of uncertainty. She had always thought she would do this alone. After all, for most of her life, it had been just her fighting to survive, fighting to make things right for herself. But now, she wasn't sure what to do with the help she had been offered. Thomas Beckett, the man who had once been distant and cold, was now someone who had made all the difference. It wasn't just the money, the treatment, it was the way he had stood beside her, the way he had shown her that she wasn't invisible. That, she mattered. But now Maya found herself struggling to adjust to this new reality. She had been independent for so long that relying on someone else felt almost like a betrayal of herself. She glanced up as Thomas entered the room, his presence commanding, yet somehow reassuring. He looked at her with a quiet intensity, his usual businesslike demeanor softened by something more human. He took a seat beside her, his expression thoughtful. "How is he?" Maya asked, her voice almost a whisper. "Better," Thomas replied. "The doctor says he'll make a full recovery. It'll take time, but he's stable now." Maya felt the weight in her chest ease, though it hadn't completely gone. She couldn't quite let herself feel fully at ease. Not yet. "I'm glad," she said, her voice trembling. "I don't know what I would have done if—" She trailed off, not sure how to finish the sentence. "You didn't have to do it alone," Thomas said, his voice calm but firm. "You don't have to do it alone now." Maya turned to face him, a knot forming in her throat. "I don't know how to thank you. You've given us more than I could have ever imagined, but—" She hesitated. "I still feel like I did something wrong. Taking the money. I didn't know who else to turn to. I couldn't just watch him die." Thomas looked at her for a long moment, then spoke softly. "What you did, Maya, was out of desperation, and I get that. I understand. But you don't have to apologize for doing what you thought was right. You saved his life. You did the hard thing, the right thing, and that's all that matters." Maya looked away, wiping her eyes quickly. The tears came unexpectedly, though she tried to suppress them. The stress of the past few weeks, the uncertainty, had all been wearing her down. But now, with Jameson recovering, she could finally feel the exhaustion creeping in. She didn't have to do this alone anymore. She was no longer invisible in this world. Thomas stood up, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "I'm going to make sure you and Jameson are taken care of," he said. We're going to figure this out. Together. Maya looked up at him, her heart full. For the first time in a long time, she felt something resembling peace settle in her chest. She wasn't alone. And for the first time, she didn't have to carry everything on her own. Better, Thomas replied. The doctor says he'll make a full recovery. It'll take time, but he's stable now. Maya felt the weight in her chest ease, though it hadn't completely gone. She couldn't quite let herself feel fully at ease. Not yet. I'm glad, she said, her voice trembling. I don't know what I would have done if... She trailed off, not sure how to finish the sentence. You didn't have to do it alone, Thomas said, his voice calm but firm. You don't have to do it alone now. He had promised Maya he would help, but as the days passed, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had failed her. He had saved Jameson, yes, but at what cost? He had never truly understood Maya, not until now. She wasn't just a maid, a lowly employee in his estate. She was someone who would do anything, sacrifice everything for the ones she loved. That was what made her different. That was why she had taken the money in the first place. She had no other choice. He had seen it in her eyes when they first met, her desperation, her strength, her unwillingness to let someone she loved slip away. But now, with Jameson recovering, Thomas could see just how deep her pain ran. She hadn't just taken the money for herself. She had done it out of love, for a child she had come to care for as if he were her own. And for that, he owed her more than just money. He owed her the truth. He had been wrong to treat her like just another employee, like just another person in his world of wealth and power. He had been so blinded by his own privilege, his own detached view of the world, that he had missed the humanity right in front of him. But now, he couldn't ignore it. Maya had given everything for Jameson, and in doing so, she had taught him more about himself than anyone else ever had. He had made a promise to help her, and he would. But he had to do more than just provide money. He had to prove to her, and to himself, that he was worthy of her trust. He had to show her that he saw her, truly saw her, and that he would not let her fight alone anymore. The door to the hospital room creaked open, and Maya stepped inside, her eyes tired but hopeful. She smiled faintly when she saw him standing there. How is he? She asked softly, her voice filled with the same quiet strength he had come to admire in her. He's doing well, Thomas replied, his voice steadier than he felt. The doctors are optimistic. It's going to take time, but he's going to pull through. Maya nodded, relief washing over her face. Thank you, she whispered, her eyes softening. Thomas hesitated before he spoke again, his voice low and sincere. Maya, I know I've made mistakes. I've treated you like just another part of my estate, like you were less than what you are. And for that, I'm sorry. You're not just an employee, Maya. You're not just a maid. You're someone who has shown me more heart and courage than I've ever had. You saved Jameson. You saved him when no one else would. Maya's expression faltered for a moment, surprise flickering in her eyes. She opened her mouth to say something, but Thomas held up a hand, stopping her. No, let me finish. I've been selfish. I've been blinded by my own world, my own wealth, and I didn't see what was in front of me. I didn't see you. I didn't see the strength in you. But he had to do more than just provide money. He had to prove to her, and to himself, that he was worthy of her trust. He had to show her that he saw her, truly saw her, and that he would not let her fight alone anymore. The door to the hospital room creaked open, and Maya stepped inside, her eyes tired but hopeful. She smiled faintly when she saw him standing there. How is he? She asked softly, her voice filled with the same quiet strength he had come to admire in her. He had promised Maya he would help, but as the days passed, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had failed her. He had saved Jameson, yes, but at what cost? He had never truly understood Maya, not until now. She wasn't just a maid, a lowly employee in his estate. She was someone who would do anything, sacrifice everything for the ones she loved. That was what made her different. That was why she had taken the money in the first place. She had no other choice. But I do now. And I promise you, I will make it right. I will help you, Maya. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. The silence in the room felt heavy. But it was different now, no longer tense or filled with guilt. Maya's eyes were searching his, as if trying to decide if his words were sincere. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, she nodded, the faintest trace of a smile tugging at her lips. "You don't have to do anything, Thomas. I'm just glad Jameson is going to be okay." She had been through so much, taking the money, feeling guilty, and then, ultimately, being offered help by the very man she had once seen as distant and uncaring. Now, standing outside Thomas's office, she felt like a stranger in her own life. But there was no turning back. Thomas had made it clear that he wanted to help her, to do more than just write a check or make empty promises. He had shown her that sometimes, people who seem unreachable could be the ones who make the greatest difference. She had made mistakes, but they didn't define her. Her love for Jameson had guided her through the darkest moments, and now, with his health improving, she was starting to understand something even more important, that she deserved more than just survival. She deserved a future, a real future. With Thomas's support, maybe that future was within reach. The door to the office opened, and Thomas stepped out. He was still the same man, powerful, composed, but there was something different in the way he looked at her now. It wasn't the cold detachment of a CEO looking at an employee. This time, there was a trace of respect, of understanding. He had seen something in her, something beyond her role as a maid, and for the first time in a long time, Maya realized that she saw something in him, too. "Maya," Thomas said, his voice warm but serious. "Can we talk?" She nodded and followed him inside. The office was just as it had always been, sleek, modern, full of wealth. But for the first time, it didn't intimidate her. Not now, not anymore. As she sat down across from him, Thomas spoke again. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened," he said. "About you, about Jameson. I want to make sure you both have the support you need, not just now, but moving forward." Maya's heart raced. She had expected him to offer more money, more resources, but what he said next caught her completely off guard. "I want you to stay," Thomas said, his voice steady but genuine. "Not just for Jameson, but for yourself. I can't undo what's been done, but I want to help you move forward. You're not alone in this anymore." Maya blinked, unsure if she had heard him correctly. "Stay?" she repeated. "Here? With you?" Thomas nodded. "Yes, I'm offering you a position here at the company. Not as a maid, but in a real capacity. You've proven yourself more than capable, Maya. I want to see what you can do if you have the opportunity." Maya's mind spun. She had never imagined anything like this. Her entire life had been defined by hard work just to survive, just to make ends meet. The idea of being offered something beyond that, something that could actually change her life, was almost impossible to believe. "I don't know what to say," she said quietly. "You don't have to say anything right now," Thomas replied. "Just know that this is real. I want to give you the chance to build something for yourself. You've been taking care of everyone else. It's time for you to take care of yourself." Maya didn't know how to respond. The weight of the offer was overwhelming. She had spent so many years just getting by, never dreaming that someone like Thomas would offer her a chance like this. It felt like a dream, one that she wasn't sure she was ready to wake up from. "I'll think about it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Thomas smiled gently. "Take all the time you need, Maya. I'm not going anywhere." As she left his office that day, Maya's heart was filled with a mixture of hope and fear. She had been given a choice, a chance to change her life. And for the first time in a long time, she felt like she could breathe again. Jameson was going to be okay. He had shown her that sometimes, people who seem unreachable could be the ones who make the greatest difference. She had made mistakes, but they didn't define her. Her love for Jameson had guided her through the darkest moments, and now, with his health improving, she was starting to understand something even more important, that she deserved more than just survival. She deserved a future, a real future. With Thomas's support, maybe that future was within reach. It had been a long, painful journey, but now, seeing him smile for the first time in weeks, she felt something she had almost forgotten existed: peace. Thomas stood quietly near the doorway, watching the two of them. His usually composed expression had softened, his eyes reflecting something new: humility, gratitude, and a deep sense of understanding. He had spent his life building walls, surrounding himself with power and control, thinking those things would protect him. But now, standing there, he realized that it was not power that brought meaning to life. It was people. It was compassion. It was love. Maya turned to look at him, their eyes meeting across the quiet room. There were no words between them, none needed. Everything that had needed to be said had already been spoken in actions. The betrayal, the forgiveness, the redemption, it all lived silently in the space between them. Thomas stepped closer to the bed, his hand resting gently on the railing. And maybe, just maybe, she could be too. The morning sunlight spilled through the large windows of the hospital room, casting a golden glow across the white sheets. Jameson was awake now, sitting up slightly, his small hands gripping the edge of the blanket as he looked out the window. The faint hum of the machines had become a steady rhythm, a reminder that life had found its way back into the room. Maya stood at the foot of the bed, her eyes soft, her heart full. "You saved yourself, sweetheart," she said softly. "You just needed someone to believe in you." Her words hung in the air, simple yet powerful. For a long moment, the room was silent except for the soft rhythm of the machines. Then Thomas spoke again, his voice low but certain. "You know, Maya," he said, "I've spent most of my life thinking that money could fix anything, that if I worked hard enough, earned enough, I could control everything. But you showed me that sometimes the greatest power is kindness. You taught me that doing the right thing means more than having everything." Maya looked up at him, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "You changed too," she said quietly. "You opened your heart. That's not something money can buy." Thomas nodded, his gaze steady. "Maybe that's the point. Maybe that's what I was missing all along." He looked down at Jameson, then back at Maya. "You both gave me something I didn't know I needed, a chance to start over." Maya smiled faintly, the corners of her lips trembling. There was a sense of closure in his words, but also a beginning. Life had a way of breaking people down, only to rebuild them stronger, softer, more human. Outside, the wind rustled gently through the trees, carrying the scent of spring. "How are you feeling, buddy?" he asked softly. Jameson smiled faintly. "Better," he said, his voice small but strong. "Thank you." Thomas swallowed hard, his voice thick with emotion. "You don't need to thank me," he said. "You thank her." He nodded toward Maya, and Jameson's gaze shifted to her. "Thank you, Miss Maya," he said with a sincerity that made her throat tighten. "You saved me." Maya knelt beside the bed, brushing a hand gently through his hair. He knew that no matter how much he did, he could never repay what she had given him, not in money, not in gratitude. But he could honor it. He could live better. The world outside the window seemed softer now, brighter. Maya turned back to look at them, Thomas standing tall, Jameson smiling faintly, and she knew this was where her story began again. No more running, no more fear, just hope, and the quiet strength of knowing she had done what was right. As she stepped closer to the bed, Jameson reached out and took her hand. His fingers were warm, his grip weak but steady. Thomas placed his hand over both of theirs. The three of them stood there in silence, bound not by blood or power, but by something far greater: humanity. The machines hummed softly, the sunlight deepened, and in that quiet, golden light, there were no more words, just the peace that comes when kindness wins. If this moment touched your heart, remember, kindness is not weakness. It is the greatest strength of all. In this powerful and emotional black story, Maya, a dedicated maid, does everything she can to save the life of a billionaire's son, Jameson, who is gravely ill. She faces the challenge of taking matters into her own hands when the wealthy family refuses to help, stealing money in a desperate attempt to save the child's life. As the story unfolds, Maya's deep love and sacrifice are revealed, showing the incredible strength of a woman determined to make a difference. The billionaire, Thomas Beckett, initially unaware of the dire situation, is shocked by Maya's actions. But through this black story, he learns about the true value of compassion and humility. Over time, Maya earns his respect, and together they find a way to save Jameson. This black story showcases the complexity of human emotions, the power of kindness, and the lessons learned when we step outside our comfort zones. Maya's journey not only transforms Jameson's life but also shifts the perspective of the billionaire, reminding us all that sometimes it is not money or power that makes a difference, it is the human connection. This emotional black story highlights the profound impact of selflessness and love, demonstrating that even in the darkest of moments, hope can emerge. Watch as Maya's act of courage leads to redemption and a new beginning for both her and the billionaire, proving that acts of kindness can change lives. The depth of this Black story will leave you reflecting on your own beliefs about strength, sacrifice, and what it truly means to make a difference.